Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to Airbrush Garage. If you're new here, welcome. If returning, thanks for coming back. So today, I'm going to be going over texture techniques, how to build texture, some basic techniques on, some freehand textures, what you can do with some texture templates, and then I'm going to be going over some erasers and blades, the subtractive technique, and how to layer that to build some texture. There's all different types of erasers, aggressive to soft erasers, depending on what type of effect you're going to go for. So, this is a subject that I could just go on for, hours, and I'm going to try to put this all into approximately a 20-minute video for you guys, just so you can, touch upon and maybe start practicing some of the techniques and adding some texture to your projects. So if that's something you like, please stick around. Consider subscribing. Hit that bell so you get future notifications. A thumbs up would be great. A couple comments, good or bad, really helps out with the YouTube algorithm and help build this channel. Don't forget to check out all my Amazon affiliate links for all the products I use in this video and all my other videos. With that, let's get started. All right, so for this demonstration, just so you know, I'm going to be using all Createx illustration colors. Illustration colors are meant to be manipulated, after being sprayed for a certain amount of time. I've even come back days later and manipulated them too. They're just a little harder to manipulate after they're fully dry, but it still can be done. I've also done this with the Wicked colors as well. Everything that I do is going to be with the illustration or the Wicked colors from Createx. All right, so for this demonstration, I just got a little bit of illustration black loaded up here in my HPC Wada with about 20% 4011 reducer. If I want it to even be more transparent, depending, on the effect that I'm going for, I can reduce it down even, further. But as you see here, I got a skull. We're going to kind of be playing around with that and putting some of the effects that we're going to be going over here first into that skull. So one of the questions I get a lot is, well, backgrounds. Do I put the background on first or do I put the background on last? The answer is yes. You can do it either way. Okay, so in this case here, I'm going to show you how we can put, I start fogging this in and then we'll put the background on and then finish it up. So either way is fine. It's just you have to remember, if you're going to put the background on later, you need, a nice template or mask. I've done a freehand before, but you got to be really careful. It's easier to be able to place, your mask back over your artwork and then put your background on at that point. First thing I want to touch upon is freehand texturing techniques. Now, there's stippling. There's a lot of freehand stipplings or a couple freehand stippling techniques that I do. I'm going to pop a link up above. I'm not really going to go over the stippling because I have a whole video on that. If you want to check that out on how to, get a nice stipple background, go check that out. But this is going to be more about getting texture and building layers over the texture. And that's one thing you got to really remember with texture. It's hard to achieve texture, or maybe even impossible to achieve really good deep texture with, one layer. You really can't do that. So keep that in mind. When you see, things that are really textured and you're wondering how they got that effect, it's because it's layers and layers of, doing a subtractive technique, which I'll be showing you in a minute. Just layers built up over layers to create that deep texture, because texture is going to be a lot of different values. Okay. So light, dark values, actually just an array, dozens of different values to get a really cool texture. So you can do some freehand techniques. Just a little hatch pattern with some really fine dagger strokes. All right. So that's that. I'll mist over it a little bit. And as you're misting over, what you're doing is you're building up that tone, or that value that you already put down is going to bring that up even darker. And your lighter shade in the background, obviously, that's its first layer, where you're putting your second layer on top of what you've already done. So you can see how the value is going to come up towards you versus the background. And that's basically, in my opinion, the whole basis of texture and how you build it. And then you'll just keep building from there. Okay, so to build texture, freehand, I'm going to put a bunch of little, basically cloud, I call them clouds, but dots. Now I'm just basically moving my hand, I'm rocking my trigger back and forth, and I'm just bringing my airbrush closer or further away. And further away is going to give you that dot that's not real sharp, where if you're coming in closer, you're going to get a sharper or more higher value dot. So you can just build texture like that, and you can do a whole background, and you hit it with some different colors, building that texture, and you get that fuzzy or blurred background. So I mean, you could build texture again freehand. It's not my favorite thing to do, to be honest with you. I like a lot of the other techniques, especially the subtractive technique that I'm going to be showing you here in a second. But that is one way to do it. And I know a lot of people like doing it that way, and a lot of people don't like using templates, and they're all about just being only freehand. I personally am not only about being freehand. I am about using any tool that I possibly can to achieve the effect, the best effect or best desired effect that I'm looking for. So if it's cheating to use any kind of tools, I'm right there. I'll use any tools that I have at my disposal. All right, when it comes to backgrounds and using stencils, I really like this one. This one is one of my favorite go-tos. I use a lot of different ones, but I really do like this one from Art Tools, FX2 texture template, and this one is called Liquid Net. So it's really cool. You just get a lot of different effects. If you can see, it goes from really, really tiny stuff to broad stuff. But wait till you see the effect that this kind of just gives you the background. Because again, I get a lot of how do I do backgrounds? Spray through this now. If you put it down on the surface, just like any template, you're going to get a sharper, crisper edge. And where it's being held up off the surface, you're going to get a softer edge. That is just a really, really cool stencil. And as you can see, I'm using some tape here. These magnets do get in my way of when I'm using stencils or templates. You can move it around as you're doing it too. Gives you all different kinds of effects. So what's really cool about using something like this is, the stencil or the template doesn't just give you one effect. You can get several different effects just by the way you're using it. And what you can do is you keep layering these effects, because you can, you're going in tight in some areas, and you come back over it with the area that isn't real tight, and you just keep layering it, and add a little color to it. And again, when you're adding this color, or you're misting over it, what you're doing is you're building up a second layer of what you just put down. So now you got two values. You got the layer, the darker layer now that has two coats on basically, and the layer that only has one coat that you're getting in between where the paint wasn't before. So now you got two layers. So as you can see, all the different layers you put on is going to be building all different values. All right, so one more I'm going to be showing you, and that's the subtractive technique, and that's with blades and erasers. So we're just going to lay some paint down here. Be our first layer of paint. So the subtractive technique, you can see here, there's just an array of tools, and there's just many, many more tools. You can use almost anything that you feel comfortable or find it, is unique that you want to scratch with. But these are basically the tools that I use. I have some fiberglass scratchers here. I have some blades. I have a ceramic blade here from Slice. I like these. These actually last a really long time versus the blades. I mean, you'd be surprised that when you're scratching with an Exacto blade like this, you know, after a pretty short period of time, you find that you're not getting as good as scratching with it. You know, if you're doing a lot of scratching, you change the blade, you're like, wow, I didn't realize how dull that blade actually got. You know, with a new blade, it scratches a lot easier. With this number 10 blade here, as you can see, it's rounded. You know, I can get some, you know, different scratches with it versus just getting the real fine point with this, but I can get a fine point with this or some broader scratches with this. You know, it just really depends on what you're looking for or what you're trying to achieve. As far as the erasers go, I got a Helix. I got a very aggressive eraser in here right now. Now they have different erasers in, you know, soft erasers versus, you know, gray or dark gray. So all different aggressivenesses of erasers that you could put in here. And that one takes paint off quite quickly. Whereas a lot of times I just like to use the ones by hand. I got an aggressive eraser here by Faber. This is an eraser stick. I'll put a link for those down below. I'll put a link for all of this stuff down below. And then I have a softer eraser here to get my, you know, nice soft edges. So again, just so many different erasers. I mean, you'll just accumulate them as you go. You guys and girls out there probably aren't even going to remember this, but this is for a typewriter. It's called a sand eraser. Very aggressive eraser. So again, depending on the type of effect that you're going for, is, you know, you'll find the tools that fit you best. But for this example, we're going to start with the subtractive technique. And I'll start with the really aggressive eraser and show you how easily that takes paint off. And if you're doing a nice fine line, you're trying to get a nice fine line with it, you can see how that'll give that to you. All right, as far as your Exacto Blade goes, you got to be careful on how you use it. You don't want to go into straight or kind of hold this at a real steep angle, because you can, you know, wind up slicing your substrate or going in too deep. Maybe, you know, if you're on metal or whether you're on, you know, your terraslate paper or whatever paper you're on. So you want to hold this at a very low angle, but as you can see, you get very fine lines with it. You get hair-like lines, very good for fur, hair. So very, very fine lines. As far as your number 10 blade goes, see, I can get a softer line with that. So I'm actually taking paint at a wider swipe than the regular Exacto blade, but I'm also not taking off as much, depending on how hard I put. Now, if I just take the tip of it, turn it around, and all of a sudden, I'm achieving nice, really thin lines as I did on the Exacto blade. So this is a lot of times is my go-to as far as blades go. I just find it more versatile. But the slice blade I got turned on to. Slice was nice enough to give me some of these. And I'll tell you what, it's a really cool tool, because I have already cut through, when I was using my Exacto blade wrong, when I was just getting started, I've already cut through, you know, some canvases. You know, little slices, but enough where you don't want to be cutting through. So these ceramic blades work really good. As you can see, they work just as good, really, as the metal blade, and they're not going to cut through your surface. You see that? So that's really cool. I do like that one a lot. So actually, I've been using that a lot lately. It's kind of new to me, but ever since I've gotten them, I basically use that instead of using the metal blades. Now, I still will use the number 10 blade, depending on, like I said, if I want to scratch off, you know, using more of the rounded edge of the blade. If I want to use a pointed type of blade, I'll use the ceramic blade. And then, of course, the aggressive eraser. Okay? And a soft eraser. Soften up these lines. Now, as I said before, in order to build texture, whatever you're putting down or scratching or subtracting off, you're always going to want to push back with whatever paint or color you're using. Because what that's going to do then is you're going to come back in and you're going to establish or reestablish some highlights on top of what you already just done. Every time you put that paint on and you push it back and you come back and you highlight more, you're creating another set of values. All right, so let's take the techniques that we just learned and let's apply it to the skull. Now, I'm not going to sit here and render the whole skull, but I'm going to show you how these techniques can apply. All right, as you can see, I got my positive template over my skull. So I'm going to take my background mask at this point and I'm going to fog some of this in. So there you go, just a quick background. You can play around with that as much as you want. There's another skull going to be in there too, so I'm not worried about that. So this is get you in where the background's going to actually be. This here's another skull. So again, we're not going to worry about that right now. So now you just want to go in and start rendering your skull. And in order to get this skull to look realistic, it's going to require a lot of texture. All right, so one of my go-to or my favorite texture templates is this template by Art Tool. I'll pop a link for this one down below. And I use this a lot on my skulls. I really do like it a lot. Either one will do. Okay. You get, I think you get 2 or 3 of them with the pack. I know you at least get 2. But when I start to come in here, I want some texture to be built up on this. I don't want it to look flat. So I'll come in and you can see already the textures you're going to get. Now, there's so many different techniques. You know, I've seen techniques with subtractive techniques, all different kind of techniques, and you can go check them out online. But as you can see, the texture building already, and I didn't even do anything. I just put one layer down with that, and I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to start, you know, rendering a little bit freehand. Keep mindful of where your light source is coming. If my light source is coming in this way, it's going to be brighter over here than it is going to be back here. So keep that all in mind. And I think that's where I'm going to have my light source coming in from this time. So I'll show you how to build an edge right here where the light's reflecting. All right, now that we got one layer of paint on here, I want to come in here and start building some texture. So I got a really light coat on here for the background because I don't want to build it up too much too quick, but I want to come in and start establishing some highlights. So I'm going to take my aggressive eraser here. Now I can do this with the helix and get a nice fine line, even finer than what I got right here. And again, it's a little awkward for me because I'm trying to stay out of the camera shot for you guys so you can see. Now, as far as building texture goes, you can go with a couple different, layering techniques. You can do some eraser subtractive techniques, and I'll show you in a second. I'm going to come back in with the template, the texture effects template. So what I'm doing is I'm just lightly removing some paint here. Another really cool template is I got a skin template here from Drew Blair actually, and great template. Great template, especially when you're doing portraits. But I use it for all kinds of different texturing. Really cool textures right there. Then that's you're starting to combine your subtractive technique with some template techniques. And you got light coming in, so if you have something that's indentated on the top of that little indentation, you should have a highlight. So you can start building those highlights. And again, if you need to come in with something a little bit more fine or aggressive, you can grab your blade. I will say this, texture, really cool texture, takes a little time. It's not a quick process, but it's one that, I don't like to rush any of my paintings. I mean, if you're doing it for speed, it's one thing, but if you're doing it, to achieve some really cool effects, sometimes it takes a little time, and you'll get quicker at it as you go, no doubt. These are all just very subtle highlights right now. And again, I'm just trying to show you all different tools that you can pull them out with. You have a little highlight right around this eye right here. Because again, of where the light's coming in. And that's going to be a higher, something higher before it goes into the eye. A higher piece of bone. You can see I'm laying this down at a very low angle too, because I want to hit it with the edge. A lot of times I'll even take, if that gets too rounded, I'll take my Exacto blade, I'll start this up, and I'll come in here with the blade and I'll square it back off because I want a nice, flat or sharp edge right here. So I'll show you a little of a layering technique here now. Again, I'm going to just mist over it so I get that highlight. I don't want to hide the highlights. I just want to mist over it and push them back a little bit. And I come back in here. And I want a nice finer highlight even maybe. Now I have two values of highlights. So I got that broader highlight, and then I have this nice fine highlight. So again, I have two different highlights in there, and that is texturing. I really don't even need to show you anymore because it's basically you take this technique and you practice it and just play around with it and just keep building your layers. And you can see what kind of highlight that provides for you in there. It's just really cool. So again, it's not my intent to render a whole skull here for you guys. It is just to show you the differences or show you how to get started with your texturing. The subtractive technique is by far my favorite, where you subtract off paint and add paint back on. It just gives you the coolest and deepest effect. This is really cool. All right, there you have it. A couple simple texturing techniques to make your artwork really come to life. Everything from freehand to using your templates or your shields, and your subtractive techniques using your erasers and your blades. Now the skull I was doing here, I'm not even finished with it yet, nor am I probably going to finish it. I was just trying to show you the different texturing techniques that you can use, especially with the subtractive technique, and the texture that you could build, relatively quickly. But this does take a little bit longer than, like, say, using your stencils and building up texture that way. But this is a really cool example of what you can do with, texturing techniques. Just sitting down, take your time. That's my advice to you when you're learning these techniques, or even when you're not learning these techniques. The more time that you put into it, sometimes you even don't know when to stop. But you want to just keep layering, subtracting out the paint, layering the paint back on. It takes a little bit of time, but the results are really worth it. So with that, hope you learned something from this video. If you did, you know the drill. Please consider subscribing. Hit that bell so you get future notifications, a couple comments, good or bad. Don't forget to check out all those links down below. And with that, we'll see you in the next video.